Hello, and welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Keely Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. What if everything you learned about leadership was designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore? Welcome back to Communicate to Lead. I'm your host, Keely Belton, and today we're doing something special, a reflective episode as we wrap up 2024 and look towards 2025. You know, this question has been haunting me lately. As an executive communication and leadership coach, I've had the privilege of working with over hundreds of women leaders this year, and I've noticed something fascinating. In January, my clients were coming to me with familiar challenges: how to be more visible, how to speak up more in meetings, how to network more effectively. But by mid-year, something had shifted. I remember sitting with 3 different clients in the same week, all successful senior leaders, all saying variations of the same thing. I'm doing everything right, being the first to volunteer, taking on extra projects, making sure I'm visible in every meeting, but I'm exhausted. And honestly, it's not moving the needle on my career. That's when it hit me. We're trying to succeed using a leadership playbook that was written for a different era. The strategies that worked even just a few years ago aren't just less effective now. Some of them are actually working against us. Today's episode is going to be different from our usual format. We'll explore the hidden power shifts of 2024, how to release old patterns and claim your leadership voice. We'll dive into what's really changed this year, what we need to unlearn, and most importantly, what new approaches are actually working for women leaders right now. And before we dive in, grab a journal or open your notes app on your smartphone. Throughout this episode, I'll share specific reflection prompts and exercises that have been super helpful and insightful for my clients. Trust me, you'll want to write these down, and you'll probably want to come back to this episode and re-listen to it a few times, and you will have the time to do that. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you questioned whether your approach to leadership was serving you or depleting you? Keep that question in mind as we dive into our first section. Let's talk about what's really changed this year. One thing has become crystal clear in 2024. Burnout isn't just a personal challenge anymore. It's become the catalyst for a complete transformation in how we approach leadership. I've noticed a fascinating shift in my coaching sessions. More and more women leaders are not only questioning the old rules of engagement, but they are completely rewriting them. Here are some eye-opening statistics. According to McKinsey and Company's 2024 Women in the Workplace report, women leaders are 1.5 times more likely than men to leave their positions due to burnout. Even more telling, 68% of women in senior leadership positions report feeling pressured to be always available. That's up 23% from just 2 years ago. Here's a story that illustrates what's happening on the ground. One of my clients, let's call her Jane, was following all the traditional leadership advice to the letter. She was always the first to log on and the last to log off. She attended every optional meeting, responded to Slack messages within minutes, and took on every special project that came her way. She was everywhere, all the time, thinking this hyper-visibility was her ticket to the next level. But here's where it gets interesting, and probably familiar to you listening right now. Despite doing more than her share of work, Jane wasn't getting promoted. In fact, during her mid-year review, her manager said something that stopped her in her tracks. "You're great at getting things done, but we need to see more strategic thinking from you." The irony is that Jane was so busy being visible that she had no time for strategic thinking. She was caught in what I now call the visibility trap, which involves confusing being seen with being valued. Let's pause here for your first reflection exercise. Take out your journal or open up your notes app and consider the following questions. Number 1, in the past month, how many times have you said yes to something just to maintain visibility? 2, what percentage of your meetings are truly strategic versus merely maintaining presence? Take a look at your calendar. Take a look at how many meetings you have attended and really be honest with yourself. Number 3, list 3 leadership behaviors you have inherited from past roles or mentors. And next to each one, write whether they energize you or deplete you. In 2024, we've witnessed a massive shift from what I call always on leadership to intentionally present leadership. The data backs this up. Recent research from Harvard Business Review shows that leaders who practice strategic presence, being fully engaged in fewer, more impactful interactions, are rated 32% more effective by their teams, and those who maintain constant availability. This shift isn't just about working less. It's about working differently. It's about moving from quantity of presence to quality of impact. Here's what this looks like in practice. Instead of attending every meeting, you choose the ones where your voice can make the most difference. Rather than responding to every email immediately, you batch your communications and provide thoughtful, comprehensive responses. And lastly, instead of saying yes to every project, you carefully select initiatives that align with your strategic goals. Take another moment to write this down. What would your ideal week look like if you replaced always on with intentionally present? Be specific. Think about meeting times, focus blocks, and communication rhythms. What would work for you? What would help you be more strategic? What would help you be more present? Because here's what's really exciting about the shift. When my clients embrace intentional presence, something remarkable happens. Not only do they report feeling more energized and focused, but they often find they're making more impact in less time. One leader reduced her meeting time by 40%. Yes, you heard that right, 40%, and received a promotion within 8 months. Not despite being less visible, but because she had the space to do more meaningful work. And she was getting noticed for that. Remember this, the goal isn't to be seen everywhere. It's to be remembered where it matters most. But this shift in how we show up leads us to an even bigger question. How has this changed the way we need to communicate? Let's explore that next. This year exposed something crucial about workplace communication, especially for women leaders. We've been trained to over-communicate, over-explain, and over-apologize. Sounds familiar? In my work with hundreds of women leaders, I've consistently observed a pattern. Many feel compelled to provide extensive context and justification of their ideas, while their male counterparts often communicate far more directly. This isn't about natural communication styles. It's about how we've been conditioned to communicate in the workplace. Think about your own communication patterns for a moment. How often do you start emails with, I just wanted to, blah, blah, blah? Preface your ideas with, this might be a silly question, but. Add a qualifying statement like, I'm not sure if this makes sense, but. Or apologize before speaking up in meetings. So think about those 4. Take a moment now to write down 3 times in the past month when you felt you needed to apologize or over-explain your position. And for each situation, ask yourself the following 3 questions. What triggered my need to apologize or over-explain? If a respected colleague were in my position, would they have apologized? And lastly, what could I have said instead? Here's what my clients and I have learned in 2024. Silence can be strategic. Listening is leadership. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to fill the space. Let me give you a concrete example from my coaching practice. One of my clients, a senior VP in tech, was known for having an answer for everything immediately. She prided herself on this quick response time. But during a crucial presentation, something unexpected happened. When asked a complex question about marketing strategy, instead of rushing to respond, she took a deliberate pause and said, "That's an important question that deserves some careful consideration. Let me think about this for a moment." That pause changed a lot of things for her. Not only did she offer a more thoughtful response, but she also noticed something powerful. The entire room leaned in. They wanted to hear what she had to say. Her silence commanded more attention than any rushed answer could have. So here's another quick reflection exercise. Think about your last 3 meetings. Where did you feel silence when you could have let it stand? When did you give an immediate response that could have benefited from thoughtful pause? What opportunities for strategic silence did you miss? Because through my coaching work, I've noticed a consistent pattern. Leaders who master the art of strategic communication, knowing when to speak up and when to pause, tend to have far more influence in their organizations. It's not about speaking more or speaking less. It's about making your words count more. So here are 3 practical strategies I've seen work repeatedly for my clients. The first one is called the 5-second rule, and it's not the Mel Robbins rule. Instead, it's before apologizing, count to 5 seconds and ask yourself if you're truly sorry or just conditioned to apologize. Number 2, the power pause. When you are asked a complex question, normalize taking a moment to think by saying, "I want to give this the thoughtful response it deserves." And number 3, the presence practice. In your next meeting, challenge yourself to speak 30% less and observe how it impacts your influence. That means be concise, be clear. So here's something that will help you. Take out your calendar right now and block out what I call strategic silence slots. 15-minute buffers before your important meetings. Use this time to center yourself and remind yourself that your presence alone carries value. This journey of transforming our communication patterns reveals something even more fundamental about leadership. As we become more aware of how we communicate, we start to notice other patterns that are really ripe for transformation. The same self-awareness that helps us to transform our communications also reveals something fascinating about leadership traits like imposter syndrome and perfectionism. These came up consistently in my coaching sessions this year. But here's the plot twist. What if these weren't actually weaknesses? One of my clients, a CFO at a fast-growing startup, came to me struggling with what she called her exhausting perfectionism. She would spend hours triple-checking data and preparing backup slides for scenarios that might never happen. In an industry known for rapid-fire decisions, her thoroughness had definitely actually prevented several costly mistakes. She became known as the person who asks the thorough questions no one else dares to ask, transforming her over-preparation into strategic leadership. So here's something to think about. What are your perceived weaknesses? Write down 3 traits you've been trying to fix about yourself. And for each one of these 3 traits, list one time it actually served you well. And how might these traits be valuable in contexts you haven't considered yet? Because working with hundreds of women leaders, I've identified what I call power paradoxes, traits often seen as weaknesses that can become distinctive leadership strengths. The perfectionist becomes the quality champion. The person who over-prepares becomes the strategic planner. The self-questioner becomes the inclusive decision maker. And the emotion-aware leader becomes the culture builder. Let me give you a concrete tool. I call it the strength flip. Identify a trait you've been trying to minimize, that you've been trying to improve and work on, and ask yourself, in what context would this exact trait be invaluable? Experiment with intentionally using this trait in that context and document the impact it has. Remember, leadership isn't about fitting yourself into someone else's template. It's about leveraging your unique traits to create impact in your way. Now that we've reframed these perceived weaknesses as potential strengths, let's look ahead to how we can intentionally shape our leadership impact in 2025. After spending thousands of hours coaching women leaders over the last few years, I'm seeing clear patterns emerge about what effective leadership will look like in 2025. The biggest shift is going to be all about authentic authority. And we touched on this year, leading from a place of genuine power rather than borrowed confidence. Let me break down the 3 essential power moves you'll want to master in 2025. The first one is strategic visibility. It isn't simply about choosing which meetings to attend. It's about intentional impact. One of my clients recently made an interesting decision. She stopped attending every single leadership meeting and instead chose to deeply prepare for and meaningfully contribute to the meetings that aligned with her key initiatives. And her result was her voice carried more weight because people knew that when she spoke, she had something significant to say. So here's a quick tip for you. Review your recurring meetings and ask yourself, if I had to cut my meeting times by 50%, which meetings would actually advance my career the most or my goals the most? Power move number 2, conscious coalition building. I really love saying that because I'm seeing a dramatic shift away from traditional networking towards what I call purposeful alliance building. This isn't about having coffee with everyone in your industry or everyone in your organization. It's about identifying and nurturing relationships that create mutual value. Think quality over quantity. This is the very aspect I was coaching another client on yesterday. As her work environment is shifting, she was looking for ways to build strategic relationships with people she valued. So she identified 5 key relationships she wanted to develop and invest in to create genuine connections with these individuals through shared projects and meaningful conversations. And here's your last power move, boundary setting as leadership. This might be the most powerful shift we're seeing. Your boundaries aren't just about protecting your time and energy. They are a teaching tool for your entire team. When you, as the leader, set clear boundaries, you're modeling sustainable leadership practices. I recently worked with a leader who started blocking our strategy time every Friday morning. At first, she felt guilty about it and she struggled to really stick to it. But then something interesting happened. Her team members started doing the same, and then overall productivity actually increased. So if you wanted to focus on these 3 power moves, I would say really get clear on what's your strategic visibility plan. In terms of your coalition building strategy, who are the 3 people whose work align most with you and that you would like to build relationships with? And then lastly, boundary setting. What's one boundary you've been hesitant to set? And how could this boundary actually benefit not only you, but your team? And then what's the first step in implementing this boundary? Now let's bring it all together. Take one final moment to write down one communication pattern you are intending to release. Be specific. What exactly will you stop doing? Maybe over apologizing, over explaining. You choose. Secondly, one leadership strength you're ready to claim, not just recognize, but actively and intentionally use. And lastly, what one boundary are you going to set? Include when and how you will implement it. Here's what I want you to remember. The leadership landscape isn't just changing, it's being completely reimagined. And you have the opportunity to be at the forefront of this transformation. This isn't just about following a trend. It's about creating a sustainable, authentic approach to leadership that works for you and inspires others. So in a nutshell, I know I've given you a lot to think about. So re-listen to the episode and decide what you want to focus on. But here's your homework before our next episode. Choose one of these power moves to implement in the next couple of weeks. Document what changes you notice, both in your energy and how others respond. And lastly, pay attention to where you feel resistance. That's often where the most significant growth opportunities lie. So if you're feeling some resistance, lean into it, think about it, dig deep to make it work for you. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. The greatest power shift of 2024 wasn't in any corporate policy or workplace trend. It was in how we, as women leaders, started to redefine leadership on our own terms. So, your homework for the holiday break: review your reflection notes from this episode. Choose one pattern you're ready to change, and then schedule a power hour with yourself sometime in January to map out your first quarter leadership moves. What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? So before the end of January, make sure you choose an hour, turn off all the notifications, block out the time, and really map out your leadership. Remember, you're not just leading a team or a project. You're leading the way for every woman who will come after you. Thank you so much for listening to Communicate to Lead. We will be taking a much needed break, and we will see you back on the podcast on Thursday, January 9th. Have a wonderful holiday season with your loved ones, and make sure to get some rest. See you in 2025, my friend. I am Keely, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.